Okay, I think we can maybe get started. Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Anish Udayakumar, Senior Vice President of Product Management and Customer Experience here at Provus, and I'll be your host today. Provus is an AI first quoting platform purpose built for services. We help services organizations drive efficiency, accuracy, and profitability. We enable services sellers to create accurate quotes, price smarter, close deals faster, and preserve margins. We focus on transforming legacy disconnected quoting processes, typically managed through spreadsheets, emails, and one off tools. Provus connects sales, delivery, and operational personas on a unified, intelligent platform. So joining me today is my friend Andrew Ozomaro, VP of Engineering and Chief Architect here at Provus. Andrew leads the technical direction behind Provus AI. Together, we are going to unpack an exciting topic for our audience today. How Provus AI gives every deal a team of AI powered services experts, right? So that's our topic for today. Let's just see if we can move the slide forward. Yes, perfect, right. Before we join or start the session, I want to kind of cover a few things, right, with the team. Feel free to drop in your questions in the chat anytime. We will be keeping an eye out for that. If we don't get to every question, we will definitely follow up afterwards. And yes, this session is going to be recorded and you will be getting the recording and the slides in the next 24 hours. Thank you, Andrew, for joining us today and welcome.
Yeah, thank you for having me. Super excited to be here.
Okay, so now let's start with the market reality today, right? As we all know, quoting for global services deals always takes a long time. It's a lengthy process, so to speak. Teams haven't truly been able to spot the right pricing signals, the market signals, and the right data points to price accurately. Above and beyond that, from a leadership perspective, there is a consistent push for incorporating AI as part of the revenue process. So, Andrew, when you look at our customers, what makes services quoting a great candidate for agentic AI? So what is your view about that?
Yeah, good question. Yeah, so I think what makes AI or what makes services quoting a good candidate is how complex it is, right? So services pricing is inherently complex. And the reasons are is because it's regional based, there's geography, there's skills, right? It's all about people labor for the main part. And then there's also, product attachments that also complicated a little bit more. And so inherently you need a lot of experience and know-how to even price a service quote. And you get a lot of complexity there. So what we do here is have an agentic universe where we can pretty much digest large amounts of data. So we can digest internal data, external data, and then really bubble up those expert level insights, right? So our agentic platform is trained on services quoting, and so it's your services expert in your pocket, essentially. And I think that's what makes the agentic framework that we provide and services quoting, they're a perfect pair together.
Absolutely. And it is an interesting space. And then if you can progress to the AI slide, the point here is that, it is a typical business problem and a complex, solution, which we can have to kind of get to, right? So given this is kind of the situation, what we have come up with is our Provus AI strategy, right? So in Provus AI, what we have done is we have kept the seller as the focal point of our AI strategy. We want to elevate the experience and outcomes of the sellers in the commerce sphere, as they interact with their various personas. What we have done is we have created an AI experience wrapper around the seller. We have built 3 AI applications. We call it field intelligence, core analysis, and discovery intelligence. We'll unpack a little bit about this as we go through. We also want to transform the seller's experience from a traditional enterprise to an agentic experience. That's kind of what we really want to do. Now, with all this as a big outcome, how did we orchestrate this? How did we get to that strategy? Just want to kind of call out, team, if you want to progress the slides to forward. One more. Perfect. Right. The next slide, please. Right now, the point we were kind of trying to kind of get to was that how do we orchestrate this, right? How do we make sure that we get the same outcomes kind of which we highlighted? We want an AI experience wrapper. We want to kind of create core AI apps which are going to hit a goal and also transform the seller's experience. So what we did was we segregated the seller experience into 3 sections, right? First is initiation of a quote. How can we make AI help the seller create a quote faster, right? Maybe use natural language descriptors or create a thought into a quote, things like that. Now, once a quote is created, how do I optimize the quote to maximize revenue and margin and make the deal more competitive? How can we have AI prompt or nudge the seller with the right kind of guidance at the right point to help achieve these outcomes? Now, finally, I got the nudge, I got the prompt. How do I convert this prompt into action, right? And all throughout this experience, we want to make sure that we have an agentic layer. And this layer is what the seller is going to use to engage and get value out of our AI applications. So as we walk through this whole experience, right, what is our differentiator? Like, what makes Provus AI different? From your perspective, Andrew, like the experience, what you have from a seller standpoint, what makes it different, right? Maybe you can share your screen, Andrew, and kind of talk through the drawer and like how, from an audience standpoint, they would be interested to understand as a seller, what kind of makes it different.
Okay. So it's a good question. And that's actually something that excites me to talk about. So please excuse my excitement. So typically when you think about, let's just take a little step back. When you think about AI, right, we think about chatbots mainly. That's kind of your key into the world of the AI. You talk, you converse, it gives you inputs, or it gives you outputs based on your inputs, right? It's doing a lot of thinking for you, but it's not doing jobs for you. In the sense, it's giving you information that you can use. That's great. But to further utilize AI, it's good to have AI use its intelligence to then perform actions for you, like optimizing my quote for me, presenting different scenarios. And we'll see further as we go on what that even means, because it gets even further than that. Optimizing scenarios and margins is great, but we also talk about business relationships, and we'll see that further when we talk about external insights. So we start here. All right. So take a step back. We're on a quote here in my org, and I have this HCM quote that I'm creating. And so I want to open up my agent drawer. And so all of our quotes in Provus will be associated to some agent drawer. Here I have a bunch of agents associated, and you can see my intelligence dashboards down here. The 3 apps we mentioned earlier: core analysis, field intelligence, and discovery intelligence here. So right away, you have a good entry point into your quote. You can know what's going on, what your agents are thinking, how they're working. And you can view very good insights here right away from every quote.
Absolutely. And this is some feedback. And Andrew and I have been working with a lot of our customers and getting a lot of feedback in terms of how they want this facilitation to kind of happen. We made the decision from a strategy standpoint that, hey, we don't want to go to a traditional enterprise experience. We want this agentic experience in the context of work where, as a seller, I'm able to kind of really ask the agent questions, give it prompts, and make sure I am getting the value in the context of my work rather than doing a swivel C and going in another tab or another application. Thank you, Andrew, for that. So let's kind of think about putting myself in the shoes of a seller. What happens first? Typically for every deal, especially complex deals, it starts with discovery. If I'm a seller, I get to attend a bunch of sales calls. I need to respond to a bunch of RFPs. I have a ton of documents I need to review, right? And sales teams spend hours and hours translating these to help them with the scoping process. So, Andrew, why don't you show our audience what discovery intelligence is all about and how Provus AI can really help this part of the seller's life?
Yeah, absolutely. And this is one of the most exciting parts. So, as a seller, right, as Anish was saying, I have a lot of information. Discovery calls here. What I'm going to walk you through is the GDPR requirement, which is actually a very common case. But I have all this information that I want to use for my quote. And then you'll see that I'll walk through that we'll have a bunch of agents actually that can operate on this. So starting with Doc Discovery Intelligence here, I've uploaded this GDPR requirement a few days back, and we can just quickly gloss over here so you can see what the AI is reading. But I have this 50-page GDPR requirement with a bunch of project stuff, details that are pertain to my project, things about IT leaders that need to be in there, certain resources. There's a lot of information in here. Through our platform, in approximately 2 minutes, I was able to then generate some analysis. Authorization, I apologize. Authorized. Okay. So through a simple upload, I was able to generate and know about the GDPR requirement. Right. So in about 2 minutes, I got a snapshot that's perfect for my project. I can see some requirements that I need to apply. I have some insights. I have some risks, and I also know some deliverables that are required. All right. So important things to know are timelines. Usually, that's where we see most of our customer projects have an issue where they incorrectly estimated the timeline that they're going to need to complete this project. And so in here, I don't miss those things, right? I can see that I need 6 weeks for pilot deployment, and I need 2 weeks for system architecture documentation.
So are you telling that we don't really have to go through a 50-page document? You just give it to our agent and that does the work for us? Is that what you're telling us?
I'm not saying you don't have to go to the document if you don't want to, but you don't have to go to the document.
So what about other collateral like this? Is it only for documents or do we have other capabilities?
No. So, I mean, it goes even further. So I show you the integration hub. We have the ability to connect to various document sources. So here I'm connected to my Zoom calls, for example, right? Because discovery calls usually take place on Zoom or some other chat interface. And we can connect to various other sources. So you'll see I'm connected to my Salesforce org and Microsoft Teams and even my Google Drive. And so all of these data sources can feed in, and my agents are basically doing the work 24 hours a day to ingest this information and provide me the insights and actually take actions for me and to optimize my quote.
Absolutely. And I think the important thing to note here is that, there is a lot of capability in terms of, tools out there we are going to, or which are going to help maybe summarize a Zoom recording for you. What is different here is, again, the theme of our, webinar today, right? How you can have Provus agents as your services experts, right? So what the capability is going to help enable you to do is, let's assume that you have a Zoom recording or an RFP document. What we offer is an AI agent designed as a services expert who is going to read, understand, or listen to your recording and provide insights and help build your deal. Great. So now we have the capability to kind of do that. Now let's kind of talk about we have a deal already, right? So the next step for us is to maximize the revenue and make the deal more profitable and competitive in the market. This is where our quote optimizer agent comes into play, right? Which is an incredibly powerful capability which we have launched, right? So, Andrew, do you want to show us what that is about and how it can help our sellers?
Yeah, absolutely. So as Anish said, here's our quote optimizer agent that I'm showing. And the common theme you'll see with all of our agents is they're goal driven, right? So quote optimizer is their goal is to optimize the quote for best margins, good revenue, and then also for customer satisfaction, right? So we're reading discovery documents and whatnot. Deal predictor's goal is to predict the deal's success, right? When it's going to close. And then we have deal rescue agent, uh, whose goal is to save an at-risk deal. So in that vein, though, here I am. I'm looking at Quote Optimizer, and Quote Optimizer has done some analysis on this quote, and it's telling me things that are very interesting, right? For example, I didn't know this, but this quote has a strong margin positioning against quotes in my org, but it's wondering about some of these things, right? So does the customer have EU employees? And I believe that's because of the GDPR requirement. The customer, the agent is wondering, can we increase offshore utilization? It's wondering, why is there a PMO that's only at 40% margin? So it's
Right.
wondering, how can I optimize some of these things? And it's letting you know, hey, this is what I'm wondering. This is what I remember. Here are some of my working theories and active experiments. Um, the quote optimizer can do.
Completely makes sense, right? So typically when you are in front of a customer, especially like negotiating heavily in these days, right, customers always come back to us saying, hey, give me a couple of scenarios, right? And this particular agent is going to help drive those kind of outcomes so easily, right? You just give the direction and it will also tell you, right, what and would we know how some of these decisions came to be?
Yeah, absolutely. So let me segue quickly into memory and patterns, and then we'll jump back into showing you the scenarios that were created. But you can, um, for every one of our agents, our agents have essentially infinite memory, and they record and they remember patterns. So for exactly in this deal, you can see I can query the patterns, to really understand like why this agent came to do what it did here. So I can see all of that here. I can see the recognized patterns, and my experiment results and whatnot. And so clicking in any of these views will give you a lot more detail about why it did it. And then you can also search and ask, questions like why it did
Yeah.
something.
Yeah. And with AI coming in new and like people are like a little apprehensive as to kind of, is it hallucinating or is it giving me the right info? So this actually gives you clarity on why a decision was made or why a recommendation was made. What are the entry points? What are the data points it looked to? And it gives you that what happened in the background information right in front. And not just that it is giving you the information, you can actually query and find out specific data points associated with the memory and patterns, right? You talked about Scenario Lab. What is that, Andrew?
Yeah, Scenario Lab is the fun part of Quote Optimizer, I would say. But here in Scenario Lab, we can talk about the business issue that we're solving here, is that to create many scenarios takes a lot of time, a lot of mental effort to figure out what the customer wants and how I can structure it to meet my margin requirements and all the other organizational requirements that I have. And so usually what happens is you just you have this tribal knowledge, people make copies, and you kind of get similar things. There's no creativity. And so in here, Quote Optimizer is taking that work away from you, or helping you with that work to spend less time during generating scenarios, and you can review. And then also being creative, right? So maybe catching things that you didn't see because it was at the bottom of the 50-page GDPR requirement. And so in here, you can see, well, what I'm showing here is this is the specific quote, this HCM quote. And this is the recommended scenario wants to add, but I can see here it's adding GDP compliance, right? So this is something that I missed as a sales rep, that would have taken many, many cycles. But here I can see in my recommended scenario, there is that. And then I can also kind of see down here that here's a specific scenario that's focused just on compliance in case I
Got
didn't
it.
see this.
So what you're telling me is that I don't have to think about what all scenarios I need to create. All those will be created for me based on the creativity level you set. And I get to choose and also understand, hey, why did AI create this for me? And maybe a new insight is going to be open, and I can create a better option for my customer. Kind of that makes sense. Okay. So now we looked at the scenario lab. We looked at what quote optimizer is, and the seller can actually pick one scenario and say, here is the one which I want to go with. Now let us talk about something which everybody is a little worried about, right? The ever changing market conditions right now. Sometimes in the news we hear like, oh no, this is changing, the tariff is changing here, regulatory changes are happening, right? What we have found out based on kind of our engagement with our customers is that AI is the only way in which you can really watch regulatory changes, competitive moves, and pricing signals in real time, because all these three aspects really drive what price point I should be and how competitive you are with respect to your competition, and are you able to really deliver the outcomes your customers are looking at, given the changing cost structures and regulatory changes kind of happening in this market. So one of our exciting Provus AI capabilities is the deal rescue agent, right? Which helps you watch those market signals in real time and helps you price with confidence, because what we don't want is put out a margin assuming that this is going to be the cost, not knowing what is going to happen or not really taking into account all the market signals. So can you share with our audience, Andrew, like what deal rescue agent is and how it does it?
Yeah, absolutely. So again, as you were saying, it's really all about tracking live market signals. All right. So if a tariff shows up, so our customers, they don't only sell services, but they sell goods and services, many of them. And so if a tariff shows up tomorrow, that has an impact. If inflation suddenly increases and you don't know, that also has an impact. So cost shifts is really big for us. And then there's competitive advantage, right? So you can see sometimes by just looking at market signals that your competitors are trying to maybe discount the price, right? So we see that a lot with AI competition. They're basically doing price competing or software compete. They're doing different things to compete with each other, but it's public information that you could use then for your quotes. So deal rescue is essentially looking at market signals for quotes that are at risk. So here I'm showing for this particular quote, there are certain things that the AI has wondered, and it's saying things that might need urgent attention, things that it's watching, and then it'll also tell you about what it's learned recently, so new patterns, easy patterns to identify, but there's also patterns which you might not think of, like open rate on emails. Right? I've noticed that the open rate on this email has been dropped after the end of the quarter. Maybe something's happening. So you really get that kind of information with deal rescue, and we can, if you have any questions, but we can go to investigation, because the power of deal rescue is you get to investigate now and really drill down into those conditions. Right? You get a high look here, and then you can drill down. Click on here so you can see what that drill down looks like. But when deal rescue then is rescuing deal, you get basically a pretty detailed analysis. So here, my deal rescue agent is actually connected to my emails, as I mentioned, email pattern analysis, and it's connected to my LinkedIn Navigator. And so it's looking for stakeholders for this deal, essentially. And so my deal rescue is telling me what it knows, what it's thinking. It's building stakeholder maps, right? And it's working with other agents in our system, right? Because the deal rescue is to save the deal. And so it might need an optimization scenario from the quote optimizer, for example.
That is an interesting point, right? So what you just mentioned was that, hey, you mentioned agents have a role and a goal, but they're not just focused and working by themselves, similar to kind of any sales team would do. They would collaborate. So what you're seeing there is colleague insights, right? So in which you can one agent is talking to another agent to get info to kind of help make sure that its goal is met, right? Makes sense.
And we call them agent debates. So they're essentially they're debating with each other over what is the best outcome.
Makes sense. Yeah. And from the investigation process, right? Is it something which is configurable? If it's something which you can say that, hey, here are the areas which I want to, how would somebody look at it from a setup perspective, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So for all of our agents, they're given a tool set, so you really get to decide. We of course give you recommendations, provide out of the box, but you get to decide if I don't want to use LinkedIn as my source of truth, I don't have to use LinkedIn, right? So these are examples of my configuration, but it's fairly simple to essentially tweak your agent to use data that you think is appropriate, including data that's not here that you don't see here, other integrations that you may have.
Makes sense. And then in the last agent, right, when we were talking about quote optimizer, you showed us the memory patterns. Does this one also have memory patterns?
Yeah, absolutely. So, and every agent is going to give you that. It's really going to give you that. I haven't shown autonomy, but every agent will give you memory and learning. They'll give you some type of brief to tell you what it's working with. Some type of action mode. So for deal rescue, it's investigation. For quote optimizer, it's the scenario lab. And then you get another tab where you can actually monitor the autonomy of the agent. So you specify levels of autonomy, and then you can actually monitor. So here we can see my agent is doing its work, and I've actually given it a lot of autonomy. So my agent is proposing migration strategies. It's creating phase proposals. It's even trying to schedule executive alignment meetings. But you can control all this autonomy down to just recommendation level if you need to.
Yeah. So this agent is staying very true to its mission to rescue the deal, right? So it is looking at external and internal data points to nudge and prompt the seller to make decisions. Hey, here is what it feels based on kind of what was seen and what it understood, and then giving you guidance on kind of how you can rescue the deal and make it more competitive. Makes sense. So from for example, tariffs. So if we get an input related to tariffs, we kind of make a deal and we win it. How does it learn, or does it learn from its past experiences?
Yeah, it does. So everything it does, it basically commits to memory, and it becomes some type of pattern, right? So you can imagine that. So I think we have pattern recognition down here to show. So for example, these are some detected patterns it's recognized over the course of time. So this one is saying this right now. I've based this deal rescue based on 3 behavioral patterns I've analyzed in the past, but it's checking past data. Right, so it'll check your org's past data. It'll check other data pools that you have, and also market intelligence. So it's remembering those over time, and then kind of continuously reapplying that as the time goes on.
Got it. So the point is that within your sales organization, you can actually really pool all this information and intelligence. Once somebody in a scenario where we won a deal because of some factors, you can actually have that centralized and be used for the remaining sales organizations to use and consume. Perfect. Makes sense. Anything else you want to share about deal rescue, Andrew?
Not much more, but I did want to, I guess if we can segue into Command Center. But I think that's essentially it.
Okay. Got it. So now let's kind of talk a little bit about agents, right? And Andrew gave an overview of some of our core agents. We discussed about the discovery intelligence, where we were able to kind of just pull up GDPR document, 50 pages. We were able to get data out of it, summarize it, and add value to our deal based on that scoping process, right? Then we saw the quote optimizer agent, where based on the creativity level, which Andrew said, it was able to create a bunch of scenarios for you. It just didn't create the scenario. It also told us how it came to that conclusion, showed us kind of the thinking behind that as well. And then finally, we also saw the deal rescue agent, which is like keeping its eyes open on the market conditions and or any other data point which you think is relevant and helpful to make your deal more competitive and be more precise in terms of costing and margins. So let's talk a little bit about agents itself, right? So Andrew had called out the fact that agents are role based and goal driven. So when you define what an agent should be, you get to decide, right? What is its mission and what is its job? So what we have done from Provus side is that we have created and designed our agents to be your digital employees, right? And we want them to be part of your digital workforce. We are augmenting the capability set which you already have within your sales organization with additional digital employees and digital strength. We also showed the fact about agents having infinite memory and they don't sleep. They are working continuously. Anything which happens outside, it is going to be looking and it's going to be thinking, right? And similar to you onboarding a regular employee, you also get to control how you onboard a digital employee. You can control the level of access. You can control the level of autonomy for all of our agents who are services experts, but digital employees, right? So that's good. So, Andrew, do you want to walk us through the standard set of agents and the capabilities which come through it? And if you want to, we can also create your own agent. So that'll be an exciting thing to kind of see, Andrew.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So out of the box, we provide, and you'll see here in my active agents, but we provide the deal rescue, quote optimizer, deal predictor, and one other that you don't see here is the RFP agent. And so their names are kind of self-explanatory, but deal rescue, right, is to save deals, rescue deals. Quote optimizer is to optimize quotes. Deal predictor predicts. And then the RFP agent is really designed to ingest RFPs, create quotes from them, and then give insights, kind of like the discovery intelligence agent. So we provide those out of the box agents and, constantly growing over time. But the beauty of our platform is that we actually built the platform with the plumbing. So you're able to create a new agent and really inherit the design guidelines and principles that we provide with all of our agents. So you can define autonomy. You with a prompt, essentially with direction, you're telling it what my goal is, and then you're giving it access to data. All right. So similar to how we say it's kind of like my digital employee that helps. Well, with your digital employee, you would give them training, you would give them access to their tools. Very much the same thing as you would do with an agent. And so I'll create a new agent here. I'll click see how we do that. And it's very simple. So I have an AI agent wizard here that I'm going to create, and the type I want to create is an investigator agent. And so we will give you some description right away, but I can then here really define what is my goal. And so, my default goal for this is analyzing patterns, but I can tell it specifically what I want my agent to do, and that will be its goal for the end of time. And you can always come back and edit the goal if the goal doesn't suit your needs. Then I'll define my autonomy level, as we were saying with all of our agents. And so you can go, we have 4 levels of autonomy, as small as advisory, which is just recommendation, no actions are performing, all the way to fully delegated. And so your agent can do all the work for you and not advise. And then finally, you connect your data. And so here I've connected my Salesforce integration and I have a couple of other data points. But at an organizational level, essentially, we have a bunch of tools that we can use defined by the org. And so I can, with org permissions, if I'm able to, I can set up my agent then to use that data, right? The agent will have access to that automatically. And that's essentially it. So you define the 3 things, and then you have an agent that lives in time and now is attached to your business workflow for you.
Yeah. And like to our audience listening, right? Like this particular capability to create your own agents, like everybody's point of view was that, oh my God, it requires a lot of coding or like advanced technical skill to do it. So what we have kind of done differently is facilitate this in a completely declarative, configurative kind of environment where if you are an administrator or you are even an end user, if you are savvy enough and you know what you really want, we have given that framework and capability to kind of create your own agent, right? So think about the aspects where we kind of touched upon, right? So you can decide what level of autonomy you want to give your agents, which is really awesome, right? So, typically what we have seen is from an AI adoption perspective, customers are like, I'm not fully sold on it. Let me see what AI is getting back to me from an insight perspective. I just want the AI to tell me stuff. I don't want AI to do anything. So you can set the level of autonomy to 0. So it just tells me and prompts me and guides me. I get to decide whether I want to use the information or not. So that's one way. But let's say after 6 months of it giving consistently right information, I can change my mind and say, yep, now I feel comfortable up to a certain threshold. I'm okay for AI to be autonomous and maybe sending emails for me or setting up a meeting for me, or let's say even approving a deal with no discounts for me, right? So that is also going to be possible. So this gives a lot of power and flexibility in the hands of the end users as well as the sales ops teams who want to kind of really automate that process and incorporate AI into kind of the ecosystem, right? So that's kind of what we have done. So overall, from a capability set standpoint, like we discussed, right? So we have launched AI apps and an agentic interface with out of the box agent to interact and get value from these AI apps in the context of work for our sellers, right? And with these set of capabilities, the next logical question which comes to mind is, hey, we are ready for AI, but where do we start? Right? It is always a question about, hey, where is my data stored? How do I start? Do I need this kind of data, or is it going to be a big transformation project to get there? So, and for services leaders in our audience who really want to put AI into motion, where should they start? What is your guidance for them?
Yeah, that's a good question. Very good question. And I think to answer that, we'll share our architecture diagram. But it's a very good question. So I think taking a step back, it's good to understand kind of how we architected the platform so you can understand like where your data lives. Because the AI, it's still about data, but now in the AI universe, as it stands, it's all about unstructured and structured data, and that's always been the problem in the past. But let's start with what we designed here. So on the left, you have your Salesforce or CRM org. And then in the middle, you have our Provus AI app. Provus AI app is effectively using external queries. And so we've built an MCP server called Profit. Pun on the name Profit, you can see. But it's designed to make profit for you for your quote. So we have Provus AI, we have Profit Service, and Profit Service is connected to your Salesforce org via your standard authorization, right? So we're really authorized on like a org level. So if you don't want the AI to use something, you can control their access very, very granularly. On the right-hand side, you'll see the digital agents, which are our out-of-the-box agents, which represent our platform. So Deal Rescue, Quote Optimizer, those agents I mentioned. And some I didn't mention earlier, so like Provus Admin, which is a really interesting one to do the administrative work for you, or deal approval to help you with deal approvals. And then you have the various data sources. So via Profit, you'll see that, and our agents are connected to these external data sources. And this is where our customers have the liberty of saying what's allowed, what's not allowed, and then adding, things that they want to add that you don't see here. So we start with that. So you notice it's just basic. It's basically plumbing. So what I'm trying to say is that you don't have to move your data to Provus platform to start off with. That's the number one concern a lot of people have is, do I have to now do this long protracted data migration to Provus? No, you don't have to do that. If your data is in a structured format, somewhere that has API access or even unstructured, a lot of people have Excels uploaded to a drive, right? So we saw that we can connect integrations like that to drives. So really, then the question becomes, it's like, how do I get started as CTO? It's really understanding where your data lives or where you want your data, or where data you want your AI to look at. And then it's about access controls. How much access do you want to give your data, or how much access do you want to give your agents, sorry, to your data? And then setting an autonomy level, right? That's where you also need to start. How much autonomy do you want to give your agents to do that work for you? And so those are the three places I would say, if you're gung ho and ready to go with AI, those are the things you kind of need to understand. The access you want to give, the autonomy level you want to give, and generally which data you want to give.
Right. And we hear a lot of concern in the market related to, is my data, if I use AI, is it going to be out in the world for others to see, right? So how do we address that?
Yeah, so it's a multi-tenant architecture from the core. So there's isolation. So you wouldn't get something like company A is put a query out and company B sees it. That won't happen because we have strong tenant isolation. So you wouldn't see any of that. And then for the LLMs, they're pre-trained on data from let's like early 2025, for example. So our LLMs don't actually share your data at all, really, with the AI providers. And we have agreements that provide that.
Makes sense. See, what if I am like leading an IT organization where I've already finalized, hey, here is the LLM I want to use. Would it be different, or can I reuse that? Like, how does that work?
Can we use any LLM? So that's the beauty of our platform also, is that we need just access to your LLM wherever it may live. And we can switch your LLM. So if you have one that's written for your business, for your own data protection, we can definitely use
Got it. Yeah. Got it. So net, what you're trying to tell me is that, my data will live in my org. There is a solid tenant isolation there. And if I have a path which has been set already in terms of, here are the guidelines in terms of data access or data policy aligned with my company's rules, I will be able to easily adopt this within those kind of guidelines, right? Makes sense. And in terms of the overall facilitation and kind of getting that agentic interface, right? Because sales is not just about quoting, right? So there is opportunity management on the upfront. There might be sales comp, things like that. So can our agents work in a separate, or if there's already a framework there, can they still use Provus agents?
Yeah, absolutely. That's also the beauty of the platform. So in the platform, all of our agents are exposed externally via some API, RESTful APIs. And so what that means is that you can use our agents upstream and downstream of it. So for opportunity management, you can create custom agents, for example. They can utilize the same data sources or different data sources, right? It's all unified within the platform, and you can communicate to them with APIs upstream, and then also downstream for your PSAs and what other downstream integrations you might have connected to Quo.
Completely makes sense.
And all of that data, right? So since you're connecting up and downstream, really feeds back into the process. So your PSA data can really help.
And right now, at least, like when we share this detail with some of our customers, right, the biggest feedback we get is the surprise when they understand the fact that agents already come policy aware, right? So for example, if you don't want to make a decision based on data in social media or LinkedIn, you just tell and align the policy with respect to the level of access and level of autonomy. The agent automatically becomes policy aware with respect to data, which is really exciting. And again, it mimics the capability for us to kind of hire a digital employee. Similar to your, code of conduct, you can have a policy assigned to kind of agents, in which this is the policy and guidelines in which they kind of operate. completely makes sense. And thank you, Andrew, for kind of sharing these insights with us, right? So I want to make sure that we have the key takeaways based on kind of what we discussed today, right? We talked about how to harness the power of AI to reduce the risk, scale our margins, and win with confidence, right? Pointing to external data, pointing to internal data, being policy aware, and making sure that the right price and the right solution is put out for our customers. We also discussed about how to augment our sales team with Provus AI agents, also known as your own digital services experts. The key thing to note here is it is not just another agent, right? So we have designed it to be digital services experts, right? So that's kind of the value prop which we have provided. And the last part, what Andrew just covered was, in your starting point, if you want to kind of take this journey with us, where to start, what are the things to kind of really look out for, right? So now I'm going to kind of open it up for Q&A. If you have not already dropped a question, feel free to add it in chat, and then we'll kind of cover the questions in the time lapse. So we have about kind of 10 minutes to go, right? So we'll wait for any questions which come up. So the question which comes out, Andrew, is that how does the output from Provus integrated to Downstream PSA application? How does the output from Provus integrated? Yeah, so from, and Andrew, like I'll take a stab at it and I'll kind of hand it over to you, right? So from application perspective, Provus stores all the right level of information in terms of the resourcing, the scoping data related to the number of hours, the effort, the Gantt chart, all of that information is stored in Provus as part of the services quoting process itself. So any downstream system which Provus connects to, all this data can be pushed down to that downstream system via that integration, right? So the output can be defined based on the business rules which the customer has. Some customers want to go to the nth level of breakdown in terms of the work breakdown structure and have that task level information go down. Some customers want a little bit higher level phase-wise information go in, but we do have the information on the top end, so we can easily push it down to the downstream system. So, Andrew, from an AI perspective, right, it's an important question, right? So if a customer is looking to transform their experience using AI, and they have applications downstream and upstream, so how would this work in context of Provus AI?
Yeah, so there's two ways. So one is the API approach, which is kind of the technical way, but within the API approach, you're essentially communicating with Provus AI, right? And so, for example, in this PSA use case, the PSA system wants to know information about how the deals were optimized, what were the optimal scenarios, right? And so you can make an API call out to the quote optimizer. The quote optimizer can give you that insights that you need to, progress downstream PSA in the PSA system. That's one way. And then the other way is through sort of like a browser automation. So if you can log into a system, we can do further analysis for you. So integration in the sense that you don't have to use an API to do it. We can also log into your PSA from Provus to see information from the PSA, right? Like prior projects, were those timelines actually extended, and that's not reflected in your quoting system. Things like that we can really pull.
Right. Makes sense. John, I hope we answered your question in that way. So we'll wait for, I think we have time for one more question. We can take it. Or if we have other questions, just let us know. We will try to answer it after the call and send it to you via email. Okay, I think that is about it. We have a few additional questions which we'll take up, in the session, or we'll respond via email after that. Okay, so that concludes our session today. Thank you so much, Andrew, for sharing your thoughts and expertise with us and our audience today, right? And helping us kind of understand kind of the value of agentic AI and how we are able to kind of address some of the market problems which we face from a services perspective, right? And thank you everyone for joining us today. We appreciate the time you have been spending with us. By the way, like we discussed, you will get the recording and the slides within the next 24 hours. And anybody in the audience interested to learn more about Provus AI and how we do services quoting and how we transform the experiences of our customers, please feel free to reach out to us. Thank you again. Thank you for joining. Have a great day. Thank you.